Part 133. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1322. Why should I tell you? Li Yangzi's face showed a sarcastic look, and the corners of his eyes and eyebrows were covered with frost. You are just a slave girl of the Li family. That look was so bad that it made people grit their teeth. Although he said this, he could see that Lily really didn't know about Li's affairs and was not pretending. This made him even more suspicious of his original guess. At the beginning, he had thought that the mark on Lily's body was probably faked by someone, but today we recognized that the mark on her body was the unique mark of the Li family, and even got angry at himself for this and killed her. Heart. The spiritual power in her body was also drawn into his body at this time. These spiritual powers did not cause any harm to his body. At first, he did not dare to draw out too much, but now he drew some, and it did not cause any harm to his body. Problem: even the spiritual power is still running smoothly at this time, and there is no situation after being tricked. In other words, she began to guess that she might be sent here deliberately by someone to plot against her, which was not true. Li Yangzi's eyelids drooped. She didn't know about the Li family. Her relationship with the Li family was on fire, and she didn't seem to know this. Who in the upper realm continent didn't know about the Li family? What happened to Li Qingxing caused a sensation in the entire upper world. I am afraid that even some of the slaves in Shuiyu Lake knew about it, but she had no idea about it. Unless, she is not from the upper world. Li Yangzi guessed the fact at once, but he was not in a hurry to ask at this time. He would find out the matter sooner or later. In fact, Lily was not that curious. At this time, Li Yangzi didn't want to say forget it. Anyway, Li Yangzi still saved her life this time. In other words, I am safe and sound during this period of time. Li Yangzi found a way to draw out the huge spiritual power sealed in her body, so she naturally started thinking about it. The spiritual power in her body is too huge. If she didn't know there was such a treasure mountain, now she knows there is such a huge energy. Naturally, Li Yangzi would not give up. Now most of the buildings in Shuiyu Lake have been destroyed due to the battle between Li Yangzi and Li Qinwu, and it is temporarily uninhabitable. Li Yangzi simply took Lily to Yunlu Island. If Li Yangzi's character were to be followed, he would be able to fly directly with a sword. If he were to travel alone from Shuiyu Lake to Yunlu Island, he would be able to reach it in 3 days at most. It's a pity that Lily is immortal and has not reached the realm of remote valleys. There are many trivial matters along the way, so naturally she cannot keep everything simple. He took out a flying magic weapon from the Kinkan ring, but Lily had to eat, drink and do a lot of things along the way. Although this magic weapon was a top-grade flying machine, it could not be compared to his own speed when traveling alone. It was still much slower, and the journey that could have been reached in 3 days was lengthened by half a month. What are you going to Yunlu Island for? The aircraft the two of them were traveling on was a ship. The hull of the ship was not big, and it could only accommodate the two of them sitting cross-legged and facing each other. Before they arrived at Yunlu Island, the aura on Li Yangzi's body was getting colder and colder day by day. From the time he got on the boat until now, he has been meditating alone and not talking to Lily. When he got on the boat in the morning, he only said about going to Yunlu Island and never said anything else. At this time, Lily finally couldn't help but asked. She was not noisy along the way, so although he was impatient, Li Yangzi did not scold her when she spoke. His originally closed eyes relaxed as he listened to her words. He opened it slowly. Yunlu Island has the largest market and auction house in Tianyang continent. The place where Shuiyu Lake is located and the Li family belong to different continents. Yunlu Island is the most prosperous capital city in Tianyang continent. There is the largest market and auction house in Tianyang continent. This is what Li Yangzi and Lily went to Yunlu Island for. I have a solution for the seal on your body. He planned to go to the auction house to buy a few machine puppets, and then use the machine puppets to attack Lily. When the time comes, the puppet will be controlled by herself and it will not harm her life. He can also wear away some of the true dragon's mark, which will be convenient for him to absorb spiritual power. This was a method he came up with after Lily was attacked by Lee Qianwu last time and the real dragon mark on her body became much weaker. But there was no need for him to explain this to Lily anymore. After saying this, he closed his eyelids again and stopped talking. Lily sighed silently. Looking at his appearance, she knew that he was not going to talk to her anymore, so she wisely stopped making any sound. The spacecraft sailed forward for a certain distance. Li Yangzi felt a wave of spiritual power and knew that someone was coming. He opened his eyes. After a while, a crisp ringtone came from far and near. Lily turned her head subconsciously. When he looked, he saw a small black dot in the distance speeding towards him, very fast, and in the blink of an eye he had stopped next to the boat. It was a gorgeous little sedan carried by 4 beautiful girls. The sedan was surrounded by cyan gauze. Through the gauze, one could vaguely see the entangled figures of young men and women sitting inside wearing brocade robes and jade crowns. There are golden bells hanging from the top of the sedan, and the bells Lily heard just now came from these golden bells. Xiaoya. Li Yangzi frowned and stood up. As soon as he finished speaking, a slender hand lifted up the gauze in the sedan chair, revealing a handsome young man with a smile. The young man was disheveled, with his clothes mostly open on his chest, and his strong chest was looming. He was holding a beautiful and enchanting female cultivator in his arms. At this time, his face was full of youth. He glanced outside, and buried it with a smile. On Xiaoya's chest. I have long felt that there is a fellow Taoist here, but I didn't expect that it would be fellow Taoist Li. The young man has a pair of peach blossom eyes. Although he is smiling at Li Yangzi, there is a bit of vigilance in his eyes. With a look of confusion, his eyes swept across Lily. For a moment, Lily felt as if she was enveloped by an invisible air pressure, making her breathless. Li Yangzi flashed and blocked her behind him, feeling uncomfortable. When the young man looked at her, the feeling like a thorn in her back faded away, and Lily breathed a sigh of relief. Xiaoya seemed not to have noticed Li Yangzi's actions, and curled up his lips. Fellow Daoist Li has now defeated Wang Yuanhe and repelled Li Qianwu. It is really gratifying that there is a successor to the Li family in Kanglan. Although Li Qianwu was beheaded by Li Yangzi in Shuiyu Lake and only nascent soul escaped not long ago, this matter has already spread throughout Tianyang continent. When the young man mentioned that there was a successor to the Kanglan Li family, the smile on the corner of his mouth was filled with unspeakable sarcasm. Lily could tell something was wrong in that tone. Although she had not been in Li Yangzi's world for a long time, due to the inheritance of blood, the Li family had more geniuses, but it was their blood that made them successful and they failed because of their blood. Because of the inheritance of the blood of the true dragon, most of the direct descendants of the Li family are powerful. However, due to the influence of the pure-blooded demon power, the direct descendants of the Li family do not have a deep relationship with each other. They have died for thousands of years. I don't know where I am because of the internal fighting in the family. Although the young man was congratulating the Li family at this time, he was also laughing at the fact that even if the Li family had 2 great monks at the nascent soul stage, they would still end up killing each other, and the curse of the bloodline could never be broken. Li Yangzi has a gloomy and arrogant personality. At this time, when Xiaoya was ridiculing him in person, his face suddenly darkened, and he was ready to take action if he disagreed. When the young man saw this scene, he immediately looked at the beautiful woman next to him. Pushed away, stretched out his hand to straighten his clothes. I heard that fellow Daoist Li has awakened the power of the great demon and can actually turn his whole body into a dragon. There was a serious look on his face, and Li Yangzi sneered, "Do you want to give it a try?" When he said this, his aura did not restrain anymore, and as soon as the huge pressure was released, he replaced Xiaoyaoho for a few people carrying the sedan. The maid turned pale all of a sudden. How could she hold on? Xiao Aoho's expression changed. He originally thought that Li Yangzi and Li Qinwu would fight. Li Qinwu had already entered the middle stage of yuanying hundreds of years ago. After retreating, he was originally preparing to hit the late stage of yuanying. Although it was said that after retreating, he would hit the late stage of yuanying. He failed, but his own strength and cultivation should have reached the stage of perfection in the middle stage of nascent soul, but this kid from the Li family only had a few hundred years of life, and he was able to fight with him and chop off the old monster's body, leaving only nascent soul to escape. Xiao Aoha originally thought that even if Li Yangzi could defeat Li Qinwu, he would be seriously injured, so he taunted him, but he did not expect that his aura was dangerous at this time. Judging from his aura, it seemed as if he had not been affected at all by the previous battle. In general, could it be that once the Li family's true dragon bloodline is awakened, it is really so powerful? Why does fellow deist Li have to embarrass them? Although these female cultivators are just his cauldron, and Xiao Aoha doesn't care about these women, if these women are allowed to be killed by Li Yangzi in front of him, how can he have a foothold in the upper world in the future? Where? Xiao Aoho released a coercive force and blocked several female cultivators behind him. He turned his palm over, and when he spread his hand, he held a small black cylinder in his palm. This is what I got from the Legia family in Tiandu Prefecture. The little gadget I came here is just for the girl behind my fellow Taoist to protect herself. As he spoke, he threw the small black cylinder towards Li Yangzi. I won't disturb fellow deist Li's elegant mood. I'll take the first step. After saying that, the green gauze hung down again, and several beautiful girls with pale faces lifted up the sedan again. They glanced at Li Yangzi fearfully and only dared to lift up the sedan and leave after seeing that he had collected his things. After walking a few hundred meters away, the woman next to Xiao Aoha tentatively wanted to snuggle into his arms, but Xiao Aoha's face was covered with a layer of black air. He touched his hand on the female cultivator's head and followed her dark face. Finally, he put his palm on her head and grabbed her head hard. With a bang, the female cultivator didn't even have time to hum before she died. Her head was blown open by him like a watermelon. After Xiao Aoha waited, he pushed the headless body of the female cultivator out and said in a dark voice, "This kid is so arrogant." To be continued. P.S. First update. Asking for a monthly ticket. Canon Fodder strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1323. After Xiao Aoha and his party left, Li Yangzi casually threw the things Xiao Aoha had just thrown overboard out of the boat and disappeared. Although Lily didn't know what the black cylinder was, Xiao Aoha said it was for her to protect herself, but Li Yangzi threw it away casually. She pursed her lips. Although she didn't say anything, Li Yangzi could tell what she was thinking at a glance. With me here, do you still need the protection of these rubbish? He raised his eyebrows. His face was so handsome that it was almost monster-like, with a look of arrogance and ridicule. He didn't realize what he said. Lily glanced at him, lowered her eyelids and said nothing. He was very powerful, but he might not be willing to protect himself. After all, if he had one more thing for self-defense, he would be a little more certain of survival. Unfortunately, it seems that he doesn't like Xiao Aoha. His things reek of powder. He used the water polo technique to wash his hands with a disgusted look on his face, as if he had just touched the black cylinder thrown by Xiao Aoha and had something unclean on his hands. Lily wanted to laugh a little, but he held back. Who is the Legia of Tiandu Prefecture? She didn't know anything about the situation here. She was going to live in this world in the future. At this moment, Li Yangzi was willing to talk, so she happened to inquire a little bit. The Tiandu Legia are a group of uneducated and unskilled trash. They don't think about making progress all day long. They only know how to create some useless garbage. He had a cold face and spoke in a venomous manner. A group of trash are famous for their skills in mechanisms, relies on external things, you don't need to know about them. Although Li Yangzi spoke briefly and harshly, Lily probably knew a lot about the Tianduolegia family. She couldn't help but ask again, who is Xiao Ho? An old white-faced female cultivator who relies on collecting tonic, he finished impatiently. Looking at her sideways, her face was indescribably good-looking, and she warned Lily, stay away from him when you see him in the future. He will want to hum even a sow when he sees her. You are not picky. Lily suddenly understood why Li Yangzi was collectively sealed by the elders of the Li family. It was really because his character was too arrogant when he was a teenager, and he was completely different from the person she knew well in the future. He was simply lawless. So much so that one can't help but want to beat him to death. Okay, his slender eyebrows wrinkled beautifully. Staring at Lily coldly, you have talked so much today, why don't you tell me where you are from? He crossed his hands on his chest, with a look that was both evil and charming. You are not from the upper world. He even suspected that Lily was most likely to be torn apart from the sky from a certain time and space point. She had no spiritual power, but the power was sealed in her body. She had the mark of the true dragon on her body, and it seemed that she had made it herself. Thinking of this, Li Yangzi looked a little ugly. Last time, the old man Li Qianwu went crazy when he saw Lily. It must be said that the mark on her body was made by him. At that time, the two of them had a fight for no reason, and he and Li Qianwu ended up fighting for it. Hatred. Although Li Yangzi didn't mind having another enemy, this hatred was inexplicable, and he still didn't understand the reason. Thinking of this made me feel a little unhappy. Since he became an adult, he has rarely felt depressed like this, and now he has taken the blame for Lily for no reason. Killing intent flashed in his eyes, and he suppressed it after a while. When Lily heard what he said, she neither admitted nor denied, you will always know in the future. He sneered and said nothing. Lily was right, sooner or later he would always know, when he got the seal in her body, if she dared to plot against him. When the time comes to search for his soul, everything will be clear. The boat became quiet again. The two of them had their own thoughts, and after such a small episode, they arrived at Yunlu Island in just half a day. Compared with Shuiyu Lake, Yunlu Island is undoubtedly much more prosperous. In addition to many guest rooms for many monks to live here, there were only countless small markets left, some of which were like modern night markets, with stalls all around. Li Yangzi took Lily all the way to the largest inn for cultivators to rest in Yunlu Island, where he settled down and told her don't run around, and after setting up a ban in the room, you can walk out of the room arrogantly. It was already 3 hours later when Li Yangzi came back. During his trip, he found someone to exchange 3 late-stage Jindan mechanism puppets. He was not in a hurry to return to Shuiyu Lake. He rented an ordinary one on Yunlu Island. Dongfu took Lily to live in, and then began a life of using machine puppets to attack and seal every day to extract flexibility from Lily's body. Half a month passed, and Li Yangzi discovered that the power in Lily's body was endless. In this half-month, not only did his strength reach the middle stage of nascent soul, but he only needed to retreat for a period of time before he could start trying to attack. She is in the late stage of nascent soul, and in addition to spiritual power, the power in her body also contains the power of a great demon. In the past, he was considered a genius in the blood of the Li family. He awakened the power of the great demon very early. Therefore, with the power of the great demon and spiritual power complementing each other, he was able to reach Yuan dynasty in just a few hundred years. In the infant stage, the power in the seal in Lily's body was far greater than his. The power of the great demon absorbed from her body in the past half-month was equivalent to the total of his years of cultivation. If he had transformed into a dragon all over his body before, he could only transform into a demon for 2 or 3 minutes at most, but now the power of the great demon in his body could sustain the demonic transformation for a quarter of an hour. At the same time, he vaguely felt that as his strength increased, there seemed to be some unknown things in his mind. The difficulties in cultivation that had confused him in the past seemed to have been overcome long ago, and he could easily understand them. Most importantly, he found that he began to have a strange feeling towards Lily, the slave girl. It felt like a schizophrenia, as if there was another him, hidden deep in his body, controlling him to stare at Lily involuntarily sometimes. But she was obviously just an ordinary low-level slave girl. He actually decided to kill her after getting the energy in her body at first, to remove an invisible threat. But at this time, as his power increased, he began to treat himself. The decision became increasingly wavering. The idea of killing her was getting weaker day by day, and compared with Li Yangzi's growing strength, Lily felt that she was about to be tortured to death by him. Every time he used the machine puppet beast to extract the spiritual power from his body, he would always attack her first. Although Lily also knew that solving the seal in her body earlier would be beneficial to both of them, but being beaten half to death every day, and then she felt so bad that she even began to doubt whether Li Yangzi's idea of sending her back to make him fall in love with her as a teenager was right or wrong. In his youth, Li Yangzi had an arrogant personality, and the chance of falling in love with her was very slim. In his eyes, she was just an object, a lowly slave girl. He never even regarded herself as an equal. She got close to him, got along with him, and even met him day and night. How could he fall in love with her when his heart has been like steel for such a long time? She began to wonder if Li Yangzi had realized that there was no way to deal with Yun Munan, so she decided to use this method to live alone. She could bear the physical pain, but she didn't know what to do with the mental torment. As time went by, she became more desperate day by day, and the spiritual power in her body seemed to be endless. The two of them had been staying on Yunlu Island for half a year, and Li Yangzi's machine puppet beasts had changed several times. Even if the spiritual power in her body is drained, she can practice, but will she really be a stranger to Li Yangzi? If you only get longevity in this way, you can only look at each other but not be with the partner who once loved you. Even if your life is longer, what will it feel like? What made her feel even more frightened was that she began to wonder if things continued like this, Li Yangzi would be sealed by the Li family elders again many years later, and then meet another self. If he meets another self, then, will she still exist in this world? If she still existed, would she watch Li Yangzi fall in love with another self who entered the mission many years later? Whenever these thoughts came to her mind, Lily couldn't help but panic. As time went by, she gradually became a little anxious. She didn't notice that the ice and snow in the young man's eyes were gradually melting. Sometimes he even looked at her with a look in his eyes. He was confused that he didn't even understand. After staying on Yunlu Island for 6 or 7 months, Li Yangzi bought almost all the puppet beasts that he could find out about on Yunlu Island. The puppet beasts with Jindan stage strength were becoming more and more vulnerable. Yunlu Island, there is no need to stay any longer. It's just that it's not easy to get a puppet beast with nascent soul stage strength. Even if some people have this thing in their hands, they may not exchange it for it. After all, as long as a puppet beast has the strength of the nascent soul stage, it is equivalent to having a helper with the strength of the nascent soul stage. In this world of cultivation, more strength means more chances of saving one's life. Therefore, Li Yangzi has been inquiring about the whereabouts of the nascent soul stage puppet beast a few months ago, but has not yet received a satisfactory reply. Li Yangzi crossed his legs to digest the spiritual power he had absorbed from Lily, but the restrictions outside the cave seemed to be lifted. He opened his eyes, and someone outside the cave formation left a message. As soon as the other person appeared in the formation, a paper crane flew up, and Xiaoya's voice came from the mouth of the paper crane, inviting him to go to an underground auction house on Yunlu Island. Li Yangzi didn't have a good impression of this person. He didn't know how Xiaoya was able to find his hiding place, but the last sentence of the message was, I have something about the whereabouts of the puppet beast that Taoist friends want to know. If Xiaoya hadn't said this, Li Yangzi would definitely not have gone, but after learning the news, Li Yangzi flew out of the temporary cave without hesitation. Recently I keep seeing people saying that I delete and send comments. The author said that he has been taking the blame for many years, and I take the blame for this. The base camp is here, so I am beyond the reach of Tencent's comments. If any comments are deleted, the author said that it is definitely not my fault. By the way, please give me your monthly vote. Girls, please vote obediently. I will only be favored. To be continued. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Canon Fodder Strategy. Author, Wan Erwr. Chapter 1324. When Li Yangzi came back, Lily had just injured her muscles and veins after trying to do some physical training, so she swallowed pills and was resting. When she saw him coming back, Lily got up and said, "I've packed my things." She didn't have many things, except for a few pieces of clothes that Li Yangzi bought for her temporarily on Yunlu Island. There was nothing else. Although she was able to avoid some problems when it came to food by swallowing the Quiet Valley pill, many things still could not be solved. Therefore, she had accumulated a few things while living in the temporary cave here for several months. When Li Yangzi went out earlier, she said she would leave Yunlu Island tomorrow. At this time, she packed her things into a small package, but Li Yangzi replied, "I won't return to Shuiyu Lake for the time being." Lily was stunned. He was not a capricious person. Now that he said he would not return to Shuiyu Lake, it must have something to do with his previous outing. Before she could speak, Li Yangzi frowned. "I want to go to Fenghuang with Wei Xiao, a trip to the Demon Valley." After he said this, he didn't realize that he was explaining to Lily where he was going. After he finished speaking, he remembered that Lily didn't know who Wei Xiao was or where the Demon Ceiling Valley was. There was a bit of hesitation on his face. "Wei Xiao is Xiaoya, you have met him before." After saying this, Lily really remembered the happy moment the two met when they went to Yunlu Island. At that time, Li Yangzi collected his things, turned around, threw them away, and said bad things about him. She glanced at Li Yangzi. His face was illuminated by the night pearls in the cave, and the shadows between his eyebrows made his eyes look darker and more handsome. He didn't realize he was explaining to himself, but Lily noticed it. "There was a bit of joy in my heart." Lily guessed that the two of them had been together for a long time, and his attitude towards her had changed slightly. She endured the small joy in her heart and forced herself to be calm and said, "Don't you like him?" In fact, she was not interested in why Li Yangzi got involved with Xiaoya. But Li Yangzi was willing to tell her his whereabouts, so naturally she couldn't let go of the opportunity to talk to him. Although the two of them had been together for so long, they usually had very few opportunities to chat like this. When Li Yangzi was talking about Xiaoya that day, obviously they don't have much favorable impressions, but Xiaoya was also very sarcastic towards the Li family. The two almost got into a fight after a disagreement. It was really strange that Li Yangzi was willing to travel with Xiaoya. Li Yangzi's face showed a bit of boredom. He has a puppet with the initial strength of nascent soul in his hand. He knows that I am looking for this thing. He promised that if I follow him to the demon-sealed valley, he will give it to me after the completion of the task. Give it to me as a thank you gift for helping him. He remembered that Xiaoya's strength was not low, otherwise it would not have been possible for him to talk to Li Yangzi that day, knowing that he had defeated Li Qinwu before, but his attitude was still so casual. Since he dared to speak provocatively that day, it proved that Xiaoya was at least in the middle nascent soul stage or above. If Lily's guess is correct, his own strength has reached this point, but he still needs Li Yangzi's help. This proves that this trip must be very dangerous. She has not cultivated and has no spiritual power at all. If Li Yangzi takes her with her, she will definitely become a burden. She frowned. Seeing that Li Yangzi hadn't thought of this problem for a while, she couldn't help but said, "If you go to the Demon Ceiling Valley, what about me? If he wants to take him with him, he will obviously become a burden to him on this trip. It must be very dangerous for him to go to a place where he can't even handle it when he is happy. He may not bring his own." Speaking privately, Lily didn't want to be separated from him. The two of them were now very unfamiliar. Finally, she had a chance to be alone with Li Yangzi, if he left. "I don't know how many years I can return." She herself has entered the world of cultivating immortals, and has also traveled to certain places to look for opportunities. She knew that for these cultivators, time had no concept, but she was different. She didn't dare to waste so much time. As soon as she said these words, Li Yangzi was stunned for a moment, with a solemn look on his face. In the past, he was used to living alone. When he found that Xiaoya had something he needed in his hands, he naturally agreed to his request without thinking. At that time, he never thought that there was a woman beside him, but now Lily reminds him. Li Yangzi paused and stopped talking for a moment. The time he made with Xiaoya was 3 days later. If he sent Lily back to Shuiyu Lake, 3 days would definitely not be enough for a round trip. Moreover, he now discovered that the seal in Lily's body would be of great benefit to him. After that, it was impossible for Li Yangzi to allow her to leave his sight. After all, he could discover the seal inside Lily, and there was no guarantee that someone else would discover it and find a way to get it in the future. In addition, Li Qian had wanted Lily's life countless times before, and he had been away from Shuiyu Lake for more than half a year. He didn't know whether the Li family had sent people to Shuiyu Lake again. It was definitely not possible to send her back to Shuiyu Lake, but it would not work if she were left here. He also knew that he would not know when he would be able to come back after going to the Demon Ceiling Valley. She was left as an ordinary mortal. "Here, you are undoubtedly just waiting to die." So after much thought, Li Yangzi decided to take Lily with him. On the day agreed with Xiaoho Wei Xiao, when Li Yangzi and Lily appeared outside Yunlu Island, there were others besides Xiaoho. After introducing each other, they found out that Li Yangzi was not the only one Wei Xiao was dating on this trip, but there were 4 others. One of them was a big man in black robes with a very sinister aura. Wei Xiao called him Mologui, and the other it was the old man in green robe, and the remaining 2 were a couple. It seemed that these people were not unknown people. When Li Yangzi saw the big man in black robe, a look of disgust appeared on his face. After the introduction, when Wei Xiao asked Li Yangzi if he needed his help in settling Lily, Li Yangzi flatly refused and asked Lily to come with him. After hearing this, everyone present looked a little unhappy. "Fellow deist Li, is it not suitable for my concubine to accompany this luggage?" The thin old man was the first to speak. He pinched his long goatee-like beard and half squinted his eyes. "It's just a woman. If it's friendly, it's just a woman. If you like it, you will definitely not be stingy with 1 or 2 beautiful maids when you are free." Everyone only thinks that Li Yangzi is inseparable from women. The Li family is extremely famous in this world. Everyone also knows that the reason why the Li family has the blood of the great demon is that they are very seductive. Even Li Yangzi's father, Li Qingxin, had a romantic affair at the time. He is even more famous in the upper world. Although I have all my Taoist friends accompanying me on this trip, there is no guarantee that there will be an accident, and she has no cultivation power. Who will be able to come to the rescue when the time comes? Xiaoya couldn't help but speak. After saying this, everyone was stunned. Then he nodded and advised, "It's better to stay here on Yunlu Island. I will take care of my servants." Seeing that everyone was opposed, the couple and the big man in black robes did not speak, but their expressions showed that they did not agree. Li Yangzi sneered, "My people, Do I still need you to protect me? She will definitely accompany me on this trip. I'm going all the way, and if something happens, I will naturally protect her. If it doesn't work, I will quit this trip. Originally, he was just a puppet beast in the nascent soul stage. To others, he might be extremely cherished, but for this group of people who have reached the nascent soul stage, for an old monster in its middle stage of infancy, it is not considered a rare and exotic object. If it doesn't work, the worst thing is to find other methods in the future and then consume the mark to absorb spiritual power. Originally, it was not necessary for the puppet beast, but now these people were dictating and interfering with what they wanted to do. As soon as these words were spoken, the atmosphere in the room suddenly froze, and the big man snorted coldly and threatened. Pressure came towards Li Yangzi, trying to force him to surrender with brute force. Everyone seemed to have not noticed the weirdness in this, and remained silent with a smile on their face. Li Yangzi narrowed his eyes, with a serious look in his eyes, and at the same time, his own pressure was released, and he was on par with the big man in black robes. This big man in black robe is a bit weird, but now Li Yangzi has absorbed almost half of the seal power in Lily's body. At this time, he is fighting with the big man, and he is not at a disadvantage. Some jade ornaments in the room bang between the fluctuations of the two people's spiritual power. There was a shattering sound, and everyone originally thought that the big man in black robe would teach Li Yangzi a lesson, but they did not expect that Li Yangzi did not appear defeated in this round, and they couldn't help but have a rough assessment of his strength. More than half a year ago, although it was heard that he killed Li Qian's incorporeal body, leaving only his nascent soul to escape, many people in the upper world were skeptical about this. After all, Li Yangzi was not very old. Even if he awakened the demon power, everyone thought the rumors were exaggerated. Many people are even more willing to believe that Li Qianwu fell into Li Yangzi's scheme because he was not prepared at all. However, they did not expect that hearing is better than seeing. The big man is already in the middle stage of nascent soul, and Li Yangzi is still able to compete with him in terms of spiritual power. If he really awakens the power of the great demon as rumored, it's hard to say who will win against the big man. Once he showed his strong strength, everyone was naturally speechless. After a moment of silence, Xiaoyahe finally sighed. In that case, it's up to you, fellow Daoist Li. After he finished speaking, he flicked his sleeves, and several jade slips flew out of them and shot at several people. In order to deceive others, everyone must walk separately. This is the route map. We will meet at the appointed place. I have retained my spiritual thoughts in the jade slips, and you fellow Taoists will know it at a glance. Everyone made an agreement and took the jade slips before they dispersed. Several people left Yunlu Island separately. The feeling of being treated like a burden was not pleasant. The most important thing is that Lily actually has no confidence at all whether Li Yangzi will protect her if something happens. I'm stuck, I'm sorry everyone. In addition, if you have a monthly pass, please vote for it. If you don't have a monthly pass, can you recommend a ticket venue? As we passed by, I didn't want to let go of even a ray of wind, I wanted to squeeze everyone clean. To be continued. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1325. Neither of them spoke on the flying boat, only the surrounding scenery quickly retreated. Lily glanced at Li Yangzi. He was meditating with his eyes closed. It had been 3 days since the two came out of Yunlu Island, but he had nothing to say. She suddenly remembered that after she had a close relationship with Li Yangzi, she always tried to escape, leaving him alone in the starry sky while she entered the mission. Was he like her now? Staring at him but unable to open your mouth to speak. She smiled bitterly and lowered her eyelids. This was really karma. At that time, she was afraid of avoiding Li Yangzi, but she didn't expect that one day she would want to talk to him, but he would say nothing and didn't want to pay attention. When What are you thinking about? He originally had his eyes closed, but the moment Lily lowered her head, he seemed to feel something and opened his eyes. From his eyes, Lily could clearly see her reflection in his eyes, but at this time, those eyes were like ice that had not melted for thousands of years, and there was no warmth in the eyes looking at her. She adjusted her clothes and took a deep breath. I thought of a person. I always wanted to hide from him. At that time later, when she knew that she couldn't hide anymore and didn't want to hide, he just managed to hide again. She couldn't find it. Hide. Li Yangzi curled his lips and stared at her with a look of hatred. Nothing can be hidden. If you are afraid of killing someone, one day you will find that you are not afraid of anything. His words were like his character. Lily glanced at him and suddenly said, "Are you afraid of anything?" After asking this question, Lily saw that his face suddenly darkened, even though the two of them had been together for a long time. But in fact, the friendship was not deep, and she was actually offended by asking this, but she knew that it was impossible for Li Yangzi to kill her for the time being, so she said so. Anyway, if it makes him unhappy at most, it will be fine if he doesn't say anything. After she finished speaking, Li Yangzi fell silent. After a while, Lily thought he wouldn't speak. But he opened his mouth. I was afraid before. When he said this, Lily became a little interested. In the later stage, he couldn't see anything worth fearing. It was only then that Lily realized that she actually knew very little about Li Yangzi. She knew that he didn't want to say anything, but couldn't help but ask again, what were you afraid of? What does it have to do with you? They were having a good conversation just now, but his heart felt like the sky in June. He changed as soon as he said it. At this time, he looked at Lily coldly, his eyebrows still raised, and he looked full of arrogance. Why should I tell you? Stay away from me. Although his face was ugly, when was he really serious? He had murderous intentions, but Lily could tell when he wasn't. At this time, he shouted loudly but did not scare Lily at all. On the contrary, the further he kept Lily away, the more Lily insisted on getting closer to him. I'm warning you. Seeing Lily approaching, Li Yangzi frowned impatiently. As soon as Lily pounced on him, he disappeared in a flash. This is the most annoying thing about immortal cultivators. Lily has approached him several times, but he can always dodge and disappear. But from his actions, Lily was even more confident that he had no murderous intention towards her, and she would not be able to catch up with him. Although the place of Xiaozhou is not big, but due to his extraordinary speed, he could appear at both ends of the boat at will, keeping Lily out of reach. You can't touch me, he sneered, the corners of his mouth full of mockery. The clothes were swaying in the wind, and he looked at the panting girl but couldn't touch the hem of his clothes. Looks indifferent. But Lily stopped and stretched out her hand to straighten her hair. Really? He didn't bother to answer at all. He had magic power and she was just an ordinary mortal. If he didn't want to be touched by her, there was absolutely no way she could touch the hem of his clothes. If I meet you, will you tell me what you have been afraid of? Lily smiled at him, with an unabashed arrogance in his eyes. I'll tell you if I meet you. As soon as he finished speaking, his face, the sneer on the boat, was still there, but Lily glanced at him, curled her lips, stretched out her hand to touch the edge of the boat, turned over and slid down. Li Yangzi will not kill her, and naturally he will not let her die. Even if he has no feelings for her after getting along with her for a long time, at least because the seal in her body is still useful to him, he will not watch her die. Dead. Although this reason made her feel uncomfortable when she thought about it, Lily was betting that when she turned over and fell down, her face was still very calm, while Li Yangzi, who was standing on the other side of the boat, had a look on his face when he saw her movements. The sneer on his face suddenly froze, and a frightening coldness appeared on his face. The next moment his figure swayed, and he had appeared outside the boat. He stretched out his hand and caught Lily around the waist. The moment her body was hugged by him, Lily felt relieved and buried her face in his chest. Compared with Lily's happiness when she was hugged by him, Li Yangzi's face looked much uglier. When he returned to the boat, he pulled Lily off his chest and threw it into the boat, and sat down on it. In the corner of Xiaozhou, he said nothing with a cold face. There was a smile on the corner of Lily's mouth, and that smile made Li Yangzi feel very complicated at this moment. He found that he was not as angry as he thought, and he couldn't think of killing her at this time, although the power in her body was very attractive. He, according to his character, would never swallow his anger and accept being coerced by others. Just like when Xiao Aoho and others asked him to leave Lily on Yunlu Island, he would rather fall out than agree, not because of a woman, but simply because he was never threatened by others. But at this moment, when he faced the smiling girl's face, besides being a little helpless, there was actually a hint of secret joy that made him feel a little inexplicable. In fact, after looking at her calm face for a long time, I always felt that her smile after the prank was successful was extremely rare. What do you want to know? He suppressed the inexplicable feeling in his heart and asked with a cold face. Lily had just been thrown badly by him, but seeing that he didn't seem to be in a good mood at this time, she didn't lean over anymore. She just sat in a corner of the boat, hugged her legs with her hands, and rested her chin on her knees. What have you been afraid of? She wanted to get closer to him just now, but now she was so far away. Li Yangzi felt a little angry again. After hearing what she said angrily, I'm afraid I disappear. Although there are still many things about Li Yangzi's world Lily that she doesn't know, she has some understanding of the power of the Li family in this world. At this time, the unruly young man used the kind of expression that made her acquainted with her many years later. When he said in a similar tone that he was afraid that he would disappear, Lily froze. She didn't ask questions, but Li Yangzi seemed to know what she would ask, and couldn't help but snorted, do you think the Li family won't be afraid of disappearing? Idiot. Not everyone in the Li family is prosperous. He frowned, with an irritated look in his eyes. My mother is from the Qin family. When he said this, his mood suddenly became bad, but when he saw Lily's confused look, he felt sad in his heart. The gloom seemed to suddenly turn into anger. You don't know the Qin family, the Qin family, the Qin family, what else do you want to ask? Lily didn't know what the Qin family had to do with what he had been afraid of. How could she know that he needed to know what the Qin family was before he was going to say something? Li Yangzi's face was dark. After many years, he had been bad to the core, introverted, and a scheming person who never showed his face. He was insidious and cunning. Lily had never seen such a bright expression on his face, which seemed to be so cold since birth. The lively expression was more fresh than scary for a while. The Qin family also had the power of the great demon in their blood. However, the Qin family is completely opposite to the Li family. The purer the blood inheritance, the slimmer the chance of having heirs. However, the Qin family, who does not have the power of the great demon, there is no such obstacle. It's a pity that the Qin family without the power of the great demon is no longer a pure Qin family, and in the end they are just ordinary monks. Therefore, the Qin family gradually disappeared from the upper world in these years. Because of this special reason, the Qin family had difficulty in producing heirs. In the later period, they established a sect and recruited many disciples. My mother is a direct descendant of the Qin family who has inherited the power of the great demon. Lily didn't expect that. She just wanted to ask him about the things he had been afraid of, but he opened his mouth to talk about his mother. At this time, she was concentrating. Not daring to interrupt him, Li Yangzi glanced at her. I'm afraid few people in the upper world know this. Anyway, as long as you know, for some reason, my birth was not liked by others. When I was young, the Li family, there were people who wanted me to die. When he was a child, he lived in fear all day long. He was afraid of the unknown. He was actually more afraid that he would never be able to open his eyes and see the world again when he fell asleep. He sneered, "My mother did her best to give birth to me, not just for me to die." Because of his childhood experiences, he had a strange persistence in life. Lily, who first met him at that time, was so persistent in wanting to survive. She was a mere mortal, but he seemed to see his own in her. In the beginning, he looked at her with a certain disdain at the beginning, which led to her subsequent help and decline, which later led to the fall of Chi Cheng. Lily remained silent, with a sneer on his face and a look of disdain on his face. "I used to be afraid, but I found that there is nothing to be afraid of. I will kill all the people who make me afraid. They can never make me afraid, so that's okay." His hair was swaying in the wind, and the stern look between his eyebrows made his eyebrows as sharp as swords. Lily only glanced at him, then turned his head away, and remained silent and stopped talking. To be continued. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1326. Li Yangzi stopped talking. He just didn't like the feeling of remembering those unpleasant past events. He had not recalled this kind of thing for many years, but now he would tell her this. Under the bright appearance of the Li family, his background was the least expected, and he did not expect that he will tell this kind of thing. After that day, Lily found that his attitude towards her became even colder, as if after saying those things, he had returned to the way he treated her at the beginning, and he no longer even had a few words with her before. She often thought of his expression when he spoke that day. The coldness seemed to come out of his bones, making people shiver all over. In such silence, the two of them quickly arrived outside the demon-sealed valley where they had agreed to wait with Xiaoyahe and others in advance. "We originally agreed to meet here 3 months later, but Xiaoyahe and others did not show up at this time." Li Yangzi landed from the sky on a small boat. When looking from a high place, Lily didn't see the so-called demon-sealing valley at all. There was a mountain range in front of her. She only glanced at it and said nothing. When she landed, Li Yangzi caught her and found a mountain top to sit cross-legged on. Down. He likes to be at the highest place, where he can collect everything in his eyes, but the wind is strong on the top of the mountain, and Lily doesn't look like he is a monk, so she can only hide behind him, trembling slightly. The girl's body was as soft as a willow branch. He felt it, but what arose in his heart was not a delicate feeling, but a silent shaking of his hand, and something like a small bell flew out of his sleeve, getting bigger and bigger. Until it became as tall as half a person, it fell to the ground with a clang, covering Lily inside. Her head passed right through the middle of the clock, leaving only her head exposed. His action just now shocked her. She was still covered at the moment, but when she came back to her senses, she struggled twice, and the bell covered her tightly. My body wasn't cold anymore, but I couldn't move at all. This look was really weird. She pushed it twice, but the clock didn't move at all. It was difficult for her to even move. When Li Yangzi's cold face saw her like this, the corners of his mouth curled up imperceptibly. "Why are you covering me up inside? Look at your little potential," he snorted coldly. "A mortal's body is so weak." She always leaned against him when she stood taller. She couldn't be quiet, and it also disturbed others. "This little bit of wind is freezing. It makes you shiver. That's good. Don't disturb me. When the time comes, you will enter the demon-sealing valley. If something goes wrong, I will cover you in it, so as not to cause me any trouble." Lily was a little annoyed when he said this, and she snorted twice. Thinking about it, he didn't know how happy he would have been if he had been closer to him like this. "Now I still feel disgusted. But fortunately, after being silent for so many days, he was finally willing to speak." Lily tried her best to ignore the little clock covering her, and asked, "Is this the demon-sealing valley?" He nodded noncommittally and sat next to Lily, face to face with her. His face was cold, and he pretended to be practicing seriously at first. It didn't take long before he reached out and poked her in the face. Her body was trapped in the bell, and there was no way to block him. Even if she raised her head up and down, she couldn't hide from him. He curled his lips. He sarcastically said, "Jump again," and threatened me to jump again. Lily didn't want to tell him this, so she changed the subject, "But I don't think this place looks like a valley." As soon as these words were spoken, a strange look flashed in Li Yangzi's eyes. He came closer to her and said, "Where are you from? You have the mark I put on you, and in your body you have the spiritual power I am familiar with and the power of the great demon inherited by the Li family. Sometimes I wonder if it is another me who sealed you. Get up and bring it here." When Zhong Nei Lily heard his words, her whole body tensed up, and she even trembled slightly in places that his eyes couldn't see. Although her face was still calm, Lily knew that her face must have turned pale at this time. He guessed the truth with random guesses. She didn't know for a moment whether she should confess or remain silent. Her heart was beating like thunder, but he laughed again. "But that's impossible." Lily was originally feeling complicated, but when she heard what he said, she was a little surprised. "Why is it impossible?" Li Yangzi glanced at her, with an indescribable dark look in his eyes. "I have only obtained at most 2/5 of the seal in your body, which is already similar to my current cultivation level. If it is me in the future, I will. This energy storage can only be done at the expense of my own lifespan." He knows his own character best. If people don't do it for themselves, heaven and earth will destroy him. He is that kind of person. How could he do something like this? What about things that harm oneself and benefit others? Even if the person who benefits is his former self, his character will definitely not do that. Most importantly, he didn't think that an ordinary mortal would be worthy of entrusting his wealth and life to her and leaving a mark on her. "I would rather take someone else's life than leave my life to others." Li Yangzi made no attempt to hide his character, and there was no warmth in his eyes. "So even if it is another me, I will never be like that." "Do it." After he said this, he closed his eyes, while Lily pursed her lips tightly and tensed up. In the silence, the big man in black robe and the couple named Long also arrived, followed by the thin old man, and the last one was Xiaoyahe. As soon as Xiaoyahe arrived, he handed over to everyone, "I met old monster Yun on the road, which delayed me for some time. I'm sorry for the long wait." The black-robed Emologui snorted coldly, "This demon sealing valley opens only once every 100 years, and there is nothing good in it. This is not the time when the demon sealing valley opens. You mysteriously made an appointment with us. Come on, is there some treasure inside?" The demon sealing valley was originally opened once every 100 years. It was usually a place for sects of various aristocratic families to train their disciples. Most of the herbs in it were only beneficial to monks in the foundation building period. Even if someone occasionally got lucky and got a high-grade magic weapon, for these few for a great monk, it is of no use. Only then did Lily know that the demon sealing valley would open in 100 years. She followed Li Yangzi quietly. When Xiaoyahe heard what old ghost Mo said, he just smiled in an extremely mysterious manner. "Now that everything has happened, since everyone is here, I won't give up. Although this demon sealing valley only opens once every 100 years, I have a way to make the gate of the demon sealing valley open briefly for about half a quarter of an hour. In the past 400 years, I have collected all the materials that can open the demonic valley gate twice. But what is there in the demon-sealed valley that is worth your troubles?" The big man named Long couldn't help but ask. Although a monk's lifespan is much longer than that of a mortal, the longer his lifespan is, the more the monk values his own life. Several people present have already entered the nascent soul stage. Except for Li Yangzi, everyone here is a monster who has lived for thousands of years. Breaking through the nascent soul stage can lead to a lifespan of more than 2,000 years. Everyone's lifespan is not long. If you can't break through, the end result of waiting for a few people is to sit and die. The more your cultivation reaches this point, the more unwilling you are to die easily. Everyone has not enough time to practice. At this time, I heard that Xiao actually spent more than 400 years looking for the materials to enter the Demon Sealing Valley. Several people were extremely surprised. As soon as the big man surnamed Long finished speaking, Xiao glanced at several people. I got a treasure map thousands of years ago. After research, I found that the address of the treasure map happened to be in this demon sealing place. In the valley, 800 years ago, I went back and forth to the demon sealing valley hundreds of times, but all failed. It was not until 500 years ago that I finally found the location marked on the treasure map. Unfortunately, it takes quite a bit of material to get into it. As for what's inside, have you ever heard of the 5-step soul chasing grass? When Xiao said this, a look of pride appeared on his face. When everyone heard about the 5-step soul chasing grass, their faces immediately changed. The people present were not only confused by Lily, but also Li Yangzi, who was nearby, were a little surprised. What exactly was this 5-step soul chasing grass? Lily was also confused, but Li Yangzi glanced at her, with hesitation in his eyes. It turns out to be necessary for refining the good fortune pill, the wife of the big man named Long asked with some joy, and even Mologui's gloomy face showed a bit of joy. If there is a good fortune pill, in the future, when we attack the transformation of gods, we are more confident. It is said that even if this grass is not used to refine the transformation elixir, if it is swallowed, it can increase your lifespan by 300 years. Legend has it that such divine objects in the upper world have long since disappeared. He disappeared, Brother Wei was able to find such a good thing. I also learned about it by accident. However, there must be strange beasts waiting for such divine objects, so in order to prevent accidents, I invite you all to go together. Xiao showed a smile on his face and looked at a few people. A glance, just before entering the valley, I declare in advance that in addition to what I promised you before entering the restriction, no matter how many 5-step soul chasing grass there are, I must first pick 2. After all, you have put in a lot of effort to enter this place. How about sharing the rest equally? Brother Wei's words are also reasonable. Everyone nodded, indicating that they had no objection to Xiaoya's proposal. Xiaoya then threw out the formation flag that he had prepared with a smile, and then threw out a jade bottle. It exploded in mid-air, and a golden eagle shadow appeared in mid-air. When Li Yangzi saw this scene, his pupils shrank slightly. The Yun family inherited the power of a great demon. It was in the shape of an eagle. This soul was released from Xiaoya now. It seems that he clearly got the souls of all demonized members of the Yun family from nowhere, and now he is using the souls as sacrifices to open the valley. No wonder he said he met the Yun family before, which delayed him for some time. I'm afraid he was just worried that old monster Yun would discover this thing on his body and he would fight for him. I haven't squeezed everyone's monthly votes dry. My vote-seeking declaration has been announced first. I used to sell my talents to get votes, but now it's finally my turn to sell my looks to get votes. Please vote for me with your monthly votes and recommendation votes. The number of recommendation votes has reached 1 million, just shy of 60,000. I really hope I can achieve success with 1 million votes. Please help me. To be continued. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1327. Once Xiaoyaoho started to activate the formation, the Golden Eagle Shadow Yuanshen struggled desperately, but seemed to be trapped in the formation. Several people present knew this, but at this time, they were hooked by the 5-step soul-chasing grass. His mind was stopped, and the soul was being refined in the formation. The formation slowly opened, and a black vortex suddenly appeared in mid-air. A large amount of cold sweat appeared on Xiaoya's face, and he said sternly, "Fellow Taoists, are you still here? What are you waiting for?" The black vortex grew bigger and bigger, and finally turned into a large hole half a man high. The spiritual energy around it was swallowed up crazily. The man in black robe jumped in first, and the others followed. Li Yangzi hesitated for a moment. Finally grabbed Lily and jumped into it. Xiaoya was the last to come in. He had clearly said before that he could open the door to the demon-sealed valley for half a quarter of an hour, but at this time it seemed that it was not even half an hour. At most, it only takes a few breaths. Xiaoya looked like his spiritual energy had been drained from his body. He stuffed the elixir into his mouth desperately while meditating and adjusting his breath. It takes more spiritual energy than I imagined. Fellow Taoists, please hurry up when you go out. There was a lot of green grass in the demon sealing valley. I wonder if it was because it bloomed only once in 100 years. The spiritual power was even more abundant than outside. Xiaoya quickly meditated and his eyes passed over Lily without leaving a trace. Lily, his back felt numb when he looked at her, and the feeling gradually faded away until she got closer to Li Yangzi. There was no one else here. Several people followed Xiaoya and rushed towards the forbidden area he found. They encountered several monsters on the way and were dispatched by them. When they came to the forbidden area that Xiaoya pointed to, they stopped. This place is surrounded by mountains on both sides, with a piece of flat land in the middle. He put down a formation disc, and as the formation opened, he put a medium-grade spiritual stone into it, and suddenly a few traces of spiritual power that did not belong to the demon-sealing valley leaked out. Several people were refreshed. Soon a space-time rift was opened, and a large amount of spiritual power burst out. Several people's faces showed joy, and they were sure that this was the place. Xiaoya glanced at everyone. Seeing that no one dared to go in first, he laughed and jumped into the cave first. Everyone also went in one after another. Li Yangzi walked at the end, turned to look at Lily, and finally told him, "Just wait outside." After he finished speaking, he threw out a set of formation flags. It was inserted into Lily's side. He quickly protected her firmly within it. This was just the demon-sealed valley where disciples of the Foundation establishment stage were tested. The monsters inside could only reach the golden core stage at most. There was a great demon power he left behind in this restriction, which was enough. But she could withstand the full blow of the monk in the early stage of Yuanying. The monster felt the power of the big monster and did not dare to come over. It would be safer for her to stay here than to enter the cave. Lily also knew that she was just a burden to him at this time. What's more, she had no room to refute at all, so she nodded. Li Yangzi finally jumped into the crack in time and space, and soon the crack disappeared. Lily stayed here alone and couldn't practice. She didn't know how long it had been. Li Yangzi and others hadn't come out yet. She didn't know if there was any danger in this cave. If Li Yangzi's original life trajectory was followed, he would definitely be impossible. Something happened at this time, but I'm afraid Li Yangzi had never experienced this trip to the demon-sealing valley with Xiaoya in his life. There is no distinction between day and night in this valley. Lily didn't know how much time had passed. Until suddenly one day, the spiritual energy around her began to fluctuate. She raised her head and saw abnormal fluctuations in the spiritual energy above her head. Although she has not practiced, she is very familiar with spiritual power. A feeling of danger came, but she was trapped in the formation and couldn't go anywhere. I was feeling a little nervous. A loud bang came from above the head, and a space-time gap was torn open in mid-air. A loud roar, mixed with spiritual power and inexplicable pressure, caused the formation of Li Yangzi on the ground to the flags began to wave. Because of this roar, the entire valley began to shake. Lily was shocked by the unknown beast's roar and felt severe pain in her heart. If she was hit hard, a fishy smell surged out of her throat, and a large amount of fishy wind burst into the air. The video came out, and a wolfish figure emerged from the gap in time and space. Before Lily could see the person in front of her clearly, the shadow had already hit her, followed closely behind by a figure with a pale face and a trace of blood on the corner of his mouth. Li Yangzi. At this time, his eyes were cold, and he didn't know what happened. Before Lily could ask, the leader bumped into her. Maybe because he thought she was in the way, a jade Ruyi had already hit her. The formation had been swaying under the roar of the unknown monster before. At this time, under the blow of Yuruyi, the formation could only block it twice, and the formation flags were broken. Lily was hit by this. A huge wave of air hit him, and the whole person was thrown into the air. Li Yangzi came out first from the entrance of the cave and stretched out his hand to catch her, but the figure in front stopped, threw the formation flag casually, and formed the formation. The array flag was driven into a large number of magic techniques by him, and a large amount of light erupted. A big man in black robes jumped out in mid-air after Li Yangzi. He also looked seriously injured, but before others could come out of the space-time rift in mid-air, his lower body suddenly seemed to be stuck at the entrance of the hole. A terrifying scream came out of his mouth. The next moment, Lily only heard the sound of chewing that made her frightened. The big man in black robe was quickly dragged back to the crack in time and space. All this happened in the lightning and flint. The big man in black robe Lian Yuan, even the gods cannot escape. As soon as the big man in black robe disappeared, the space-time crack that was about to disappear was suddenly squeezed open by a huge head. With a loud roar, the head struggled twice and came out of the crack. This is a giant snake that was about to turn into a dragon. Lily didn't turn around to look, but she also knew something was wrong. At this moment, Xiao Aoho had a look of embarrassment on his face and was desperately activating the formation. He saw the giant snake swallowing the big man in black robes in one gulp, and then unexpectedly emerged from the rift in time and space. The formation was finally set up, and he turned to wave to Li Yangzi, "Fellow Daoist Li, what are you waiting for? Let's go quickly." From the time Lily was knocked away by Xiao Aoho to now, in just a blink of an eye, her body has not yet fallen. When she saw Li Yangzi ducking in the direction of Xiao Aoho, when she heard Xiao Aoho's greeting, she felt a chill in her heart. Something quickly rushed towards me. The next moment, half of her body was sucked into a moist and cold space. Even though she didn't turn her head at this time, Lily seemed to understand when she thought of the roar just now. It was probably because these people entered the restricted space and caused some trouble. An easy monster. At this time, he must have been sucked into the mouth by the monster, but it had not yet been swallowed. She was a little confused for a moment, thinking of the many things she had experienced in her life. Li Yangzi was already several feet away from her. He didn't love her at all. This giant beast could chase Xiao Aoho and others into such an embarrassing situation. In such a situation, under such circumstances, he could still swallow the big man in black robe just now. How could he come to save him? The smile on Xiao Aoho's face looked particularly dazzling at this time. The monster's mouth seemed to be closing, and she could already feel that her body had just been bitten by sharp teeth. This kind of fear before death is not comparable to death in the mission. There are fluctuations in spiritual power all around, as if the door to time and space is about to be opened. She glanced at Li Yangzi and knew that he might not save her, but still I couldn't help but shout, "Li Yangzi!" The face of the person standing next to Xiao Aoho stiffened, and his eyes showed a bit of confusion. In fact, in such a critical situation, he really shouldn't save Lily. She is just a low-status slave girl, and she will die if she dies. But even though he was thinking this, his eyes turned around involuntarily to see that she was bitten by the huge snake. The snake's mouth had not yet closed, and her body looked so petite. I'm afraid it wasn't that small. The monster stuffed its teeth. He thought of the girl who turned over and fell on the airship, of the girl on Yunlu Island who allowed him to seize the seal but never cried out in pain, and of the cute look on the cliff that he covered in a bell with only one head exposed, and in his eyes with a cold look on his face, he shouted hysterically. Walk! His heart felt cold, and he turned around to step into the formation, but something went wrong. At that moment, there was a sinister look in his eyes. When his toes were about to step into the formation, Xiaoya had a look of surprise on his face. The next moment, Li Yangzi hooked up. He curled his lips, grabbed Xiaoya who was eager to enter the formation without any precautions, and pushed him into the formation. Ah! Xiaoya let out a heartbreaking scream. His body was quickly killed by the formation, leaving only his soul still struggling. There was a look of resentment on his face, and as he was pushed into the formation began to activate. Li Yangzi turned his hand, and a small bell was held in his hand, and he used it as a hood over Lily. When the snake was about to shut up, Lily was covered in the bell. The bell became bigger and bigger, and the snake couldn't even close its mouth. As if it was irritated, it closed its mouth heavily, and a huge clang sound was heard from its bite. Within this time, Li Yangzi had already flown up and pulled the little girl out of the snake's mouth who thought she would definitely die. She was still trembling, but once she was out of danger, she reached out and hugged him tightly. He put one arm around her waist and coaxed gently, "Don't be afraid." That tone was extremely familiar, as if the original Li Yangzi had returned. She was stunned for a moment. The next moment, Li Yangzi hugged her with one hand and used a magic weapon to attack the snake. The dragon snake was enraged, roaring continuously, and ran after Li Yangzi. At this time, the dragon snake was following behind him. The door of time and space that Xiaoyaoho had created before had been opened next to it. The dragon snake's tail whipped the place into pieces. Splashing around, seeing Li Yangzi stop, he rushed towards him. When Li Yangzi saw him coming, he dodged and disappeared. The dragon snake couldn't hold back in time and rushed into the gate of time and space in the formation. Below is the award-winning scene of Oanka. Wan, Xiao Li, how do you feel about the fact that you saved Xiao He this time and received a good person card, a bonus of 500, and a red flower unanimously awarded by everyone? Xiao Li, I think I saved people bravely and risked my own life. There should be endless applause here. In addition, I would like to thank my biological mother Wan for giving me this opportunity to make a heroic appearance and let my glorious image be deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. I think only monthly tickets can express how everyone feels at this time. Wan, please vote for me. To be continued. Canon Fodder Strategy. Author, Wan ERWR. Chapter 1328. The door of time and space could not last long. As soon as the snake rushed out, the two of them only saw the snake turning its head ferociously. When they wanted to rush in again, the door of time and space slowly closed with a whoosh. The dragon's roar suddenly disappeared without a trace. The two gasped desperately, and the surroundings suddenly became quiet, as if they could only hear the rapid heartbeats of the two. If it weren't for the messy scene left behind after the snake attack, Lily might have thought that everything that had just happened was like a dream. The two of them fell heavily from mid-air to the ground. She fell a few steps away from Li Yangzi. At this time, he saw that his hair crown had spread out, his face was pale, and a wisp of blood dripped from the corner of his mouth along his chin. His eyes were cold. The tone in which he gently told her not to be afraid seemed like she had misheard. You. Lily didn't even expect that he would save her. There was no need for him to risk his life to save her. Li Yangzi snorted and took out a bottle of pills from the kinkin ring. He swallowed a few pills and his face looked much better. He stood up unsteadily, sat down next to Lily, and stuffed the pills. After entering her mouth, she crossed her legs and meditated. At this time, his heart was in chaos. Just now, by some strange combination of tricks, he actually chose to stay and save Lily. Although he had already guessed Xiao Aoho's conspiracy, this old guy had called him early in the morning, probably because he wanted to use his soul to open the door to time and space. He was no less sinister than Xiao Aoho, but he had guessed it in the morning but remained silent. When Xiao Aoho tried to trick him into entering the formation, he pushed him back into the formation and used it as the secret key to unlock the formation. But he clearly should have left this place in a flash at that time, but for some reason, when she opened her mouth and called out her name, there was no thought of escaping at all, so he chose to let the snake go. Although the two of them survived in the end, this method was obviously much more dangerous. At that moment, he seemed to have been snatched away, and a feeling of distress flashed through his heart. He knew clearly that it would be safest to escape, but he still stayed to save her. That monster just now. Lily swallowed the pill. She was already much better. She only suffered skin trauma. Her body had just been pierced by the teeth of the giant snake. At this time, after taking the elixir, the bleeding had stopped. However, Li Yangzi seemed to be in a much more serious condition. She turned to look at him. His brows furrowed slightly. Let it go. He released the dragon snake from the demon ceiling valley. Entering the upper realm, it is conceivable that the appearance of this dragon snake will probably make the people outside suffer enough. After all, Xiao Aoho and he and others were almost eaten by the giant snake that had entered the stage of divine transformation. If the people outside wanted to destroy the giant snake, they would probably have to put in some effort. Half a month ago, Xiao Aoho and others entered the space-time rift from the restriction. Although they had already guessed that there would be a monster waiting beside the five-step soul-breaking grass, no one expected that the monster would be so powerful. Perhaps there is much more spiritual power here than in the outside world. This dragon snake has survived in the cracks of time and space for who knows how many years, and has actually entered the stage of divine transformation. Not only did the last few people fail to collect the five-step soul-breaking grass, but they lost their lives here. As soon as he took the elixir, he suppressed the injury, covered his chest and stood up and walked towards the place where Xiao Ao had just set up the formation. At this time, the formation had been completely destroyed, but the Kinkan ring in the middle was left. Li Yangzi stretched out his hand, picked it up. This Xiao Ao has reached the late nascent soul stage. It's an old monster that has lived for thousands of years. There were a lot of good things, including the nascent soul stage puppet that he had promised to give to Li Yangzi. It contained all kinds of things, and Li Yangzi naturally took it as his own at this time. He turned around and glanced at Lily, who was still sitting on the ground. Maybe we'll be here for 50 or 60 years. The gate of time and space in the Demon Ceiling Valley has been closed since the last time it opened. It was more than 30 years ago that the two of them had to stay in this place for 50 or 60 years before they might have a chance to get out, but it was only a possibility. I just don't know where it will appear then. There are too many cracks in time and space here, and there are many dangers and too many variables. It would be fine if Li Yangzi was alone, but he didn't expect that there would be an uncultivated Lily now. Accidents may happen at any time in a place like this. He looked through the Kinkan bag left by Xiao Ao and quickly found the treasure map that Xiao Ao had mentioned before. It was a pity that those teleporters who forced the door to space were opened. The material has been used up at this point. Li Yangzi threw the things into his Kinkan bag and walked towards Lily. Go to the restriction inside first. The restriction that sealed the treasure map that Xiao Ao found in the Demon Valley had been destroyed by the dragon snake. At this time, there was a huge fluctuation of spiritual energy there. The spiritual energy inside was more dense than here. The most important thing was that there was indeed something that Xiao Ao mentioned. Five-step heartbroken grass, but unfortunately few people who came in were not lucky enough to get it. Lily was pulled up by Li Yangzi and rushed into the space door. Because the space gap was not stable, Li Yangzi did not dare to stay for a long time. He collected all the 5-step soul-breaking grass inside before taking Lily out. In that restriction, the nascent soul stage puppet left by Xiao Aoho was used by him to deal with the restriction on Lily. 2 months later, part of the spiritual power in Lily's body had been sucked away, and there was not much left. For Lily, there are only 2 people living in this uninhabited demon-sealed valley, and she is very satisfied. She has good patience and can endure the loneliness without other people. Li Yangzi has been meditating for several days, and the injuries from the last fight with the snake have almost healed. There is no distinction between day and night in the demon-sealing valley. He didn't dare to stray too far away from Lily when he was meditating these days. She occasionally walked around nearby, but she found a huge pool nearby. There was a tree on a big tree beside the pool. There are several huge spirit nests. She threw a stone down, causing a few splashes of water, but no monsters came out of it. She thought it must be because of the dragon snake that ran out of the space crack before. All the nearby monsters had been driven away. The spirit nest was hanging on a big tree in the middle of the cliff. She threw a stone over it. Even half a spirit bee didn't escape. She didn't know if there was spiritual honey in it, but even if there was honey, she had nothing to collect. She decided to go back and ask Li Yangzi if he had an empty jade bottle. When she returned the same way, she saw that Li Yangzi had opened his eyes. You. Lily was about to ask him if his injury was better. Li Yangzi raised his chin at her and motioned for her to come over. I'm going to find a place to take the opportunity to attack the stage of divine transformation after absorbing a lot of spiritual power from Lily's body. The power of the big demon in the body is now much deeper than before. Li Yangzi is 60% sure that he can enter the early stage of divine transformation. This magical valley opens once every 100 years. But after the influence of several people entering the valley this time, in fact, when it is opened again next time, I don't know if it will still be in the same place, or it may not necessarily be decades later. It may even take longer. Although he had saved Lily before like a man possessed, he was not prepared to waste the past few decades on this girl. It seemed that Li Yangzi had to admit that she was special, but he did not want to treat her as a girl. 10 years were wasted with her. He said, looking at Lily's dazed look. He felt a strange and unbearable feeling in his heart. This feeling was very unfamiliar. He frowned and endured it forcefully. I don't know how many years it will be before we meet again. I don't even know if we will see each other again in the future. A monk may go into seclusion for decades, or even hundreds of years, and Lily is just a mortal, and she may not meet him again in the future. Such thoughts came to Li Yangzi's mind, making him tighten his lips. He pursed his lips. That unfamiliar feeling of reluctance made him frown, and his eyelids blocked the look in his eyes. There is a 5-step soul-breaking grass here, which can increase your lifespan by about 300 years. If you take it, we will see you again if we are destined. He turned his palm and found a 5-step grass that he had collected from the space restriction. The soul-breaking grass was lying in his slender and clean palm. Xiao Aoho and others had sacrificed their lives to get this herb, but now they didn't expect that they could get it so easily. Lily's face turned slightly pale, but she still reached out to get it. She is bound to win over Li Yangzi. There are not many seals left in her body, as long as this problem is solved. Then you can practice again in the future. After eating these 5-step soul-breaking grass, she gained another 300 years of life. She must have time to wait until Li Yangzi comes out of seclusion. When her fingertips touched Li Yangzi's palm, he instinctively closed his palm. Holding her palm with the grass in his hand, Li Yangzi's mind went blank at this moment. This action of holding her hand was just instinctive. His own eyes looked confused for a moment, and he quickly let go of her hand before he could react. The feeling of being held by him still remained on Lily's palm. When she looked up at him, his expression was cold, as if he didn't realize what he had just done. "What about the remaining spiritual power in my body?" she asked, and Li Yangzi said, "There is not much left in the seal. I will find a way to solve it in the next 2 days." After meeting her for a while, although he was cold-hearted, he had extraordinary feelings for this mysterious girl, so he decided to do more for her. There are monsters in this demonic valley. A few days ago, because of the snake, the nearby monsters have been scared away by the pressure of the snake, but as time goes by, the monsters will definitely come back. For him, although these monsters it is not a trouble at all, but for an ordinary person like Lily who does not have any magic power, these monsters are enough to kill her. Although there is a seal in her body, if she encounters a powerful monster, the mark in her body can only be resisted, and it will disappear in a few times at most. Therefore, firstly, it will eliminate the mark in her body, and secondly, it can also easily eliminate some threatening monsters near the valley. In this way, she might be able to survive the decades in the valley safely. There was only so much he could do for her, and if fate had played a trick on her and she still died in this valley, it could only be said that this was her fate. After Li Yangzi finished speaking, he took out several small jade bottles. These bottles are bigo pills. There is abundant spiritual energy in this valley, and there are herbs and spiritual fruits, but she cannot move around at will. The bigo pills here are all that Li Yangzi ordered before. What Lily bought at the auction when she was on Yunlu Island was enough for her to use for 30 or 40 years. After explaining the explanation, he glanced at Lily and said, "I will clean up some monsters nearby." After saying this, the body jumped into the air and jumped onto the treetops not far away, and disappeared after a few jumps. The person he is now is not the person he used to be. For the current Li Yangzi, maybe he thinks that he has done his best to help him reach this point. Lily looked at his leaving figure for a long time before picking up the 5-step breaking weapon in his hand. The soul grass was stuffed into his mouth in 2s and 3s. When the grass was swallowed into her stomach, it turned into spiritual power and wandered through her limbs and bones. This time, Li Yangzi didn't come back for about a day after leaving. Lily guessed whether he had found another place to dig a cave for retreat and practice. Days were still going on, and she was going to go to the place where she had found the spirit beehive before to see if there was some honey in it. Li Yangzi herself also said that because Xiao Aoho opened the time and space gate of the Demon Sealing Valley in advance, it is not known whether the Demon Sealing Valley will be opened decades later. The bigo pill here is not enough to sustain her until 60 or 70 years. If Li Yangzi had already, since she was in seclusion, she still had to figure out the food thing herself. The spirit bee's nest was on a huge tree next to the pool. The branches were slanted against the cliff. Below was the pool. When Lily was climbing up, she stepped on the muddy shushua and fell into the pool. She climbed up the big tree. The hive was so huge that it could probably accommodate 3 or 4 people inside. Before she even climbed close, she could already smell the scent of spiritual honey. She climbed up the big tree carefully. The hive was not far away. The closer I got, the bigger I realized how big it was. The honeycomb was nestled in the middle of the treetops. Lily moved over and buried her upper body into the honeycomb. Unexpectedly, the seemingly solid honeycomb was actually not strong. As soon as her upper body climbed over, the honeycomb shook and fell down. Her upper body was stuck in the hive, and her hands were also supported in it. Before she could pull it out, her center of gravity was unstable, and both the person and the hive fell down. This was really unlucky. When she fell into the water with a plop, she felt that her body was surrounded by the cold lake water. She struggled to get out of the hive, and with some embarrassment, she raised her head out of the water and saw that the lakeside had disappeared. Li Yangzi, who had been away for a long time, came back at some point. He was now crossing his arms and staring at her with a half smile. Lily stretched out her hand to wipe the water from her face and swam towards the lake. The pool was so cold that she shivered all over. She finally swam to the lake. Li Yangzi was already squatting on the shore. She had just climbed up the cliff. It had already taken a lot of effort to reach the wall. At this time, my whole body was weak. I finally grabbed the soil on the shore and tried to climb up. After I sat on it, I started to tremble all over. 4,000 words. The shortfall of 2,000 words will be filled in tomorrow. There will probably be an extra episode tomorrow night, to be continued. Canon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1329. Aren't you in seclusion? The water in the pool was very cold. She twisted her sleeves and the clothes clung tightly to her body after being soaked in the water. Li Yangzi's eyes fell on her lips, which were slightly blue from the cold, and she murmured, "I seem to." He didn't realize what Lily had just said, because at this time he seemed to have seen Lily somewhere before. His eyes were fixed on her face. The face was getting closer and closer, and there was a hint of struggle in his eyes from time to time. His warm breath sprayed on the top of her head. Lily raised her head. There was something wrong with his expression. Li Yangzi was always cold and cold. When he was a teenager, he was colder in appearance than the one Lily was familiar with many years later. Much more, his face was almost expressionless, but his eyes were a little confused at this time, and his face looked very strange, as if he was a little anxious. Lily instinctively began to slide down, trying to escape into the water. But as soon as Lily retreated, Li Yangzi also moved forward. His eyes slowly narrowed, as if he was thinking about something, and his expression seemed to be possessed. Lily's body was already sliding down, and her toes had already touched the water, but Li Yangzi was getting closer and closer to her. Lily's body was slowly sliding down. At this time, Li Yangzi was very strange. It is said that people who are possessed are irrational, so she tried to slow down as much as possible. Action, not wanting to irritate him, "Aren't you looking for a place to retreat?" There were two words lingering in his heart, as if they were extremely familiar, and they seemed to be covered by a veil. He clearly knew that there were two important things, but Li Yangzi opened his mouth, but couldn't shout them out. Beads of sweat broke out on his forehead. It's like my eyes can't find the focus. This situation is not right. Lily's calves were submerged into the water pool, and before he could react, she jumped into the water pool. Turn around to run away. Her action seemed to wake Li Yangzi up all of a sudden. His eyes were red and he instinctively wanted to reach out to catch her, but because of his weird situation just now, she had already jumped into the water. His fingertips only touched her long, wet, and cold hair, and then he heard a plop sound and she fell into the water. Li Yangzi sneered. Bai's attempt to escape clearly angered him. Although he didn't catch anyone, he looked unhurried. He mobilized his spiritual power and poured a magic spell into the water. The originally calm lake surface suddenly made waves, and the water splashes rushed the Lily towards the shore. From just jumping off the lake. Before Lily could swim 2 meters away, she was hit back by the waves. The waves pushed her and washed her into the shore, where she fell into the hands of Li Yangzi. The girl's body bounced like a lively fish in his hands, and her soft body was like a willow. His hands pressed on her waist, pressing out several shallow dimples. At this time, Li Yangzi looked dangerous. His hair moved without any wind, and his eyes lost focus at this moment. Lily was tightly held in his hand, struggling desperately, but to no avail. There seemed to be something wrong with his situation at this time. The spiritual power in his body began to move around. If Lily hadn't had the mark of the real dragon on her body, she would have been torn to pieces by the fluctuations in his spiritual power. In addition to the fluctuations in spiritual power, the power of the great demon in him was also somewhat uncontrollable, and his pupils gradually turned into vertical slit pupils. The eyes turned from black to dark green. Golden scales even began to appear on his face. This change in his body proved that he had lost his ability to control himself at this time, and he didn't know what he encountered on his way out. At this time, the power of the great demon in his body began to flow around. Once he loses his mind, he is ruled by the great demon nature. He might even regain his hunting instincts. But at this time, even though he knew that Li Yangzi was in danger, Lily was caught in his hand and was unable to break free. There was a look of struggle on his face, and the scales came out and he was forced to endure it. This was repeated several times, and soon he was unable to struggle. The scales covered his entire handsome and cold face, and he turned into a big demon. In this shape, Lily was caught in mid-air. The huge claws grabbed her body, as if he would crush her with just a little force. While struggling desperately, Li Yangzi transformed into a human again and took her down into the pool. A lip came over to help her catch her breath. When she was caught ashore, she gasped for air, and the slender fingers played with her body. His eyes were still upright, as if he was acting only on instinct. During the exchange of breaths, she was affected by him, and she was completely irrational. She was drowsy and put into the most vulnerable position by him. She seemed to hear Li Yangzi whispered in her ear. "Zai." That familiar call made Lily's eyes widen, and she frowned at the pain in her body. The gentle hands moved around her body with some distress, and the kisses were protective. At this time, Lily was shocked again. Fortunately, Li Yangzi at this time was not like the young man who had doubts about her, but more like the person in her memory. He finally told her to wait. Overwhelming joy was mixed with pleasure, and a large amount of spiritual energy was sucked out of her body. When Lily opened her eyes again, she was still lying on the shore, and what happened before seemed like a dream. But the marks left on his body proved that what happened before had indeed happened. His body was still sore and unbearable, but Li Yangzi was no longer around. She thought of the Xiao He she heard before. Lily was very sure that it was not a hallucination. It must be Li Yangzi. She didn't know what method he used to realize that he had appeared with himself when he was a teenager. In the body. Li Yangzi's change yesterday might have something to do with him. He asked himself to wait. Lily thought at first that he was deceiving her when he said he would show up again, but then she realized that Li Yangzi had already made arrangements. Although she didn't know how long Li Yangzi would make her wait, it was better to have hope than no hope. She picked up some clothes and put them on, and waited for about 2 days. When she didn't find Li Yangzi coming back again, she guessed that he might be in retreat according to his original plan. It's time to hit the stage of becoming a god. But he guessed that at this time, he should already have the consciousness of Li Yangzi many years later in his body. What he called himself waiting should be waiting for the opportunity for him to reappear. She tried to practice physical training, and found that the seal in her body had been absorbed by Li Yangzi through tonics, and she could practice again. This demon-sealed valley was extremely spiritually powerful and was a good place for cultivation. She easily entered the foundation building stage and began to hunt certain monsters in this valley. The traces left by Xiao waiting and others have been made up by time. Lily doesn't know how much time has passed. She has entered the great perfection of the later stage of foundation building and easily entered the golden elixir stage. She practiced several times during the original mission, and only then did the real benefits show. She was very proficient in physical training, not to mention the Tao Te Ching. She had practiced it countless times, and because of Rong Li's help in the first place, Tao Te after practicing, it was very easy for her. She also has a lot of actual combat experience, and the monsters in the valley are no match for her. On that day, Li Yangzi said that the demon-sealed valley would be reopened in about 60 or 70 years. It has been an unknown amount of time now, but the demon-sealed valley must have been affected by the forceful opening of the gate of time and space, and it has not been opened. Although it took more than 100 years to enter the golden elixir stage, Lily had taken the 5-step soul-breaking grasp before practicing, which increased her longevity, but her appearance has not changed now. When she was about to reach the middle stage of the golden core, she searched for Li Yangzi's whereabouts in the valley. But before she found Li Yangzi, the spiritual power in the valley was already surging crazily in one place, and Lily was awakened from her meditation. This situation should be a strange phenomenon that occurs when someone breaks through. There was no one else in the valley except her and Li Yangzi. Lily was so happy that she got up and hurried in the direction of the abnormal fluctuations in spiritual power. From a distance, she saw anomalies in mid-air, and she didn't know whether it was because of the influence of this spiritual power or other reasons. The demon ceiling valley, which had not opened the door to time and space for several years, was actually moving. On one end is the gate of time and space that is gradually forming, and on the other end is a large amount of spiritual power being poured into the same place. Lily paused, but still rushed in the direction of the abnormal spiritual power. The gate of time and space in mid-air became larger and larger. The sound of lightning and thunder rang out all around, and the spiritual energy in the demon ceiling valley was quickly absorbed by the abnormal fluctuations. The demon ceiling valley, which had disappeared for 200 years, reappeared in the upper world, with the gloomy sky above its head. Lily had not seen anything like this in the Devil's Valley for more than 100 years. There was a muffled thunder above her head, and a monk not far away had noticed something strange here and was rushing here desperately. When Lily rushed to the scene of the incident, Li Yangzi, whom she had not seen for many years, was already floating in the air, with thunder and lightning falling from above his head. The power of that day can be felt even if Lily is very far away. But the figure in mid-air seemed to feel no pain at all. The first lightning did not leave many scars on his body, followed by the first and second lightning. Seeing such a scene, Lily knew that Li Yangzi should have successfully entered the God transformation stage. Once he survived this thunder tribulation, he would be a God transformation stage monk. She stood far away and did not get close to him, so as not to distract him. Once she died from the thunder, her soul would be destroyed. When the seventh thunder sounded, the thunder above his head had not dispersed. He was already injured, so he drank medicine and held on until the ninth extremely powerful lightning formed in mid-air, and Li Yangzi suddenly transformed. As a dragon, he goes head-on with lightning. Thunder and lightning struck him, covering his originally golden scales with purple electricity. The dark clouds in the sky gradually dispersed. He withstood the ninth thunder and turned into a human form and landed on the ground. The drops in the sky could repair his scars. Lily had not passed away from the physical rain. She was still thinking about how she was going to explain to Li Yangzi that not only had she not died in the demon ceiling valley for more than 100 years, but she had practiced to become a golden elixir stage monk. Kevin, I'm so stuck. I'm sorry to everyone. To be continued. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1330. Li Yangzi was extremely suspicious and extremely wary of people. Knowing that the person she liked might be in his consciousness, she didn't want to hide at this time. But before she could think of what to say, Li Yangzi had already discovered her location and flew towards her. Before she could open her mouth, Li Yangzi appeared in front of her, held her face in his hands, lowered his head and kissed her lips. His move covered Lily, and his warm tongue hooked the tip of her tongue and sucked gently. His two hands cupped both sides of her cheeks, and his eagerness was conveyed through the hot kiss. Lily put her hands on her cheeks. On his arm, he reluctantly moved his head away, glanced into the distance, frowned, grabbed the lily and disappeared within a few seconds. His strength is no longer at the nascent soul stage, and his escape technique is extremely fast. The people chasing him haven't even arrived yet. He has already left this place dozens of miles away. Lily was a little surprised to see his hand holding her, and he turned his head with a smile. He didn't speak but just stared at her with a smile. He no longer looked like the cold and repulsive young man from thousands of miles away. Instead, he looked somewhat similar to the Li Yangzi she was familiar with. Lily tentatively spoke, but he only smiled and said nothing. Lily hesitated for a moment, but Li Yangzi had already caught him. He picked up her hand, put it to his lips and touched it lightly. "What's wrong?" Although she had felt Li Yangzi's presence before going into seclusion, it was clear that Li Yangzi left when he was a teenager later, which proved that even if he appeared consciously, he would definitely be at a disadvantage. But at this moment, his appearance made Lily confused again. "Don't you recognize your husband?" Li Yangzi smiled as soon as he said these words. Lily's eyes suddenly widened, and he stretched out his arms towards Lily. "I said, I will appear again." His words completely confirmed his identity, and Lily didn't even think about it. She threw herself into his arms. He closed his arms tightly, trapping her firmly in his arms, and rested his chin on her head. "I have always been by your side, why are you crying?" He never left her side. He was by her side from beginning to end. How could you come back?" Lily really couldn't figure it out. This kind of surprise was really too big. Her eyes turned red. "I thought you no longer existed." The trouble Yun Munan caused him had made him trapped in his own consciousness. When she came out of the last mission, she discovered the spiritual power in her body, and Lily thought he had actually disappeared. "Find a place first. I will make it clear to you the two of them had just escaped from the demon-sealed valley and alerted some monks. In order to avoid waiting for unsighted people to disturb the precious reunion of the two, Li Yangzi took Lily and found a place with thin spiritual energy. After using his sword energy to carve out a cave, he placed a restriction at the entrance of the cave and then said, 'In fact, my physical body does not exist.' What he didn't say to Lily at the beginning, he now honestly confessed it. When he rebelled against the Li family, he alerted the elders of the Li family who had not been born for many years, destroyed his body, and split his 7 emotions and sealed them. In fact, he has never been willing to be eliminated like this, so after he woke up, he began to collect his own strength in an attempt to find a way to resurrect. But his physical body had already been destroyed in that battle. In fact, all Lily knew from the beginning to the end was his powerful soul. So it will appear then. Occasionally his spirit is weak. It is precisely for this reason. The two of them were intimate every time they were on a mission, so there was no blood connection. Li Yangzi knew very well that relying solely on his soul, no matter how powerful his spiritual thoughts were. But once he was discovered by the Li family, his original strength was defeated by the Li family. Not to mention now that all he has left is his soul. Because of Yun Munan's incident, I have become more determined to take over my life. He wanted to find someone to take over, and only his own body was the most suitable. Li Yangzi's eyes gradually became gentle. Although Yun Munan was sinister and cunning, he was still better. He had long thought about the outcome of putting himself to death and living again. Lily was the person he trusted most, so he gave up his soul and everything he had accumulated over the years, including his own consciousness, was sealed in her body, sending her back to the time when he was young. So I told you at the beginning that I would reappear. He had even been by her side all the time, waiting for the opportunity to seize him. He is always cunning, and he has already figured out early on that if his teenage self discovered something strange about Lily, he would be suspicious of her in every possible way. The person who knows him best is always himself. He used his young self to draw out the spiritual power from Lily's body, and he carefully lurked his consciousness deep in the body of Li Yangzi when he was a teenager. At this time, he is not as good as him after experiencing many things. How can he be able to calculate? Li Yangzi is like a very patient wolf waiting to be hunted. From the beginning when he was young, he discovered Lily's existence and planted inner demons. Later, after receiving her spiritual power, he couldn't help but want to get more from her body. He had ambitions when he was young, and indeed he was out of control when he was young. He lurked quietly, and did not take the opportunity to seize the body. Instead, he made his young self plant doubts about Lily's origin in his heart, until the flower named suspicion bloomed bigger and bigger, until he absorbed it as a young man. Lily's body has more and more spiritual power, and his consciousness becomes more powerful. Li Yangzi's soul has survived for many years, and his mental strength is immeasurable. In addition, he is patient and not in a hurry. On the contrary, when he was a teenager, he gradually lost his composure and began to show signs of going crazy. He knew Lily was anxious and comforted her while making out with her by the pool. It wasn't until he hit the stage of becoming a god when he was a teenager that Li Yangzi's opportunity finally came. The young man had already sowed inner demons. When he broke through the stage of transformation into gods and killed the inner demons, Li Yangzi's soul turned into inner demons and swallowed him up. Although he had achieved good cultivation when he was young, apart from his physical strength, there was no comparison between the young man and Li Yangzi in terms of demon power or mental power. He would seize his own body, break through the stage of becoming a god, and return to this world again. World. Lily was dumbfounded and speechless at his plan, but he held her hand tightly and smiled gently. Do you really think I will make him fall in love with you? How could he give her to others before he actually swallowed the delicious food he found? Even if that person is his former self, it's impossible. Lily thought she knew enough about him, but then she realized that she actually didn't know much about him. But he had planned everything properly. Although she felt uncomfortable for a while, the result now was much better than she expected. In fact, she had not done anything yet, and he had arranged everything properly. It's properly posted. Lily sat cross-legged opposite him, and his eyes kept falling on her, making her unable to raise her head. Then why did you lie to me before and not tell me? He clearly promised that he would not lie to himself. After Lily said this, Li Yangzi curled up the corners of his lips, reached out and pushed a strand of her hair behind her ears. He endured it, knowing that she was beside him during his more than 100 years in the demon-sealed valley, but he couldn't look at her, and now he couldn't get enough of her. It's a concealment, not a deception. The reason why he didn't tell her in advance was because he knew how suspicious he used to be. Only if she can hide it from herself can she possibly hide it from him. Lily thought about it carefully and realized that he really just didn't say it, and he wasn't just making up lies to deceive herself. In this way, he did not break his original promise that he would not deceive himself. After sorting out the cause and effect, Lily breathed a sigh of relief. At the same time, thinking of his life experience, she couldn't help but ask, what did you do to make the Li family seal you? He didn't tell this question when he was a teenager, but at this time, Li Yangzi naturally wouldn't hide it from her. My mother was born in the Qin family, you also know, he once said when he was a boy at that time. Lily nodded. He reached out and touched Lily's head, and was silent for a moment. The stronger the demon power of the Qin family, the stronger the demon power, it is more difficult for people to have heirs, so in order to pass on the legacy, the Qin family recruits many disciples. 700 years ago, Li Yangzi's mother, as the daughter of the Qin family, inherited the power of the great demon. At the age of less than 300 years, she entered the early stage of the golden elixir and at the same time awakened the power of the great demon. At that time, my father was being hunted and fled into the territory of the Qin family. The Li family inherited the blood of a true dragon and had a dragon nature. When he was injured, he lost his mind and raped the descendants of the Qin family, and half of them were harvested. Repair. At that time, the Qin family was humiliated, and after being harvested, her foundation was completely destroyed. She was just a useless person in her life. She hated her to the bone. After Li Qingxin was done, she disappeared mysteriously. After the Qin family regained consciousness, she asked the Qin family to strictly guard it. He wanted to find out the whereabouts of Li Qingxin and avenge himself for losing his virginity, being humiliated, and being raped and ruined his life. It's a pity that Li Qingxin was not found in the end, but Qin herself was pregnant. At that time, Li Qingxin was rescued by a female disciple taken in by the Qin family. During the process of recovering from his injuries, the heir of the Li family thought that what he had ruined in the first place was the innocence of the female disciple adopted by the Qin family. Get along with each other, and the love is deeply rooted. After returning to the Li family, he proposed marriage to the Qin family. The Li family has a great reputation in the upper world, but the Qin family is just a declining demon clan. Although it still has the inheritance of the great demon blood, it has become out of date due to the sparse population. When the Qin family found out that Li Qingxin was the one who ruined her innocence, she hated him but could not take revenge. When she found out that it was a female disciple of her Qin family who had taken Li Qingxin in, she was furious and had the female disciple imprisoned. Please vote for me. Yesterday, I ate porridge that had been left out for a few days and had a sour taste. As a result, I vomited and passed urine. I finished 2 chapters with superhuman willpower, and Kevin was stuck like a dog. Woof 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 woof. Please give me your monthly votes. To be continued. Canon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1331. The person he liked was imprisoned by the Qin family, which was like touching the back of Li Qingxin. Li Qingxin was furious and slaughtered the entire Qin family. Although Li Yangzi was born in the end, because of this reason, his birth was never what the Li family expected. The death of the direct descendants of the Qin family was a lingering curse on Li Yangzi's mother. The moment her son was born, she put the hatred of the Qin family on him. She gave birth to a son who committed suicide. She was ruined and had no ability to take revenge, but she still had a son. If she gave birth to a son, he could take revenge on the Li family for her. She believed that this descendant who might inherit the power of the great demon of the Li family would get back the hatred of the Qin family from the Li family, including both the principal and the prophet. The Li family was most afraid of killing each other. She knew that the moment her son was born, even if Li Qingxin didn't like him, it would be impossible to kill him. So the Li family wants me to die, and I also want Li Qingxin to die, as Li Yangzi said when he was a teenager. His thoughts are still the same today. My mother did not give birth to me just to let me die. His expression was arrogant. From the day he was born, no one had the right to take his life away, not even the Qin family. Everyone is not qualified to decide whether he will be born or not, but he can decide his own destiny. When he is weak and unable to do anything, then he becomes strong and makes the entire Li family bow before him one day. When Song Yan, a disciple of the Qin family, married Li Qingxin and bore him children, among the Li family, these people hated Li Yangzi because of his origin, were wary of him, and wished him to die. However, because of the inheritance of the Li family's blood, among the Li family, the most taboo is family fighting. What a few brothers can do in a few hours. Not much less than the adults. Although he did not die in the hands of the adults, he almost died in the hands of his brothers several times. No mother to protect, no father to watch over. In this upper world, weak people live worse than dogs. His life was as cheap as a piece of grass, so he developed a cold and selfish character. He is cruel and ruthless. Before he met Lily, he had no mercy in his actions. Except for Lily, he was so cruel to himself when he was a teenager and to him after the accident, without any hesitation. Are you afraid of me? He stared at Lily, although there was still a slight smile on his face. But those pupils were full of indifference. This is the real him. In fact, the person who looked at her with a smile at that time was just an illusion that he hid deeper after suffering a loss. He gained wisdom every time he suffered. He suffered a big loss at the hands of Mr. Li, but he made a comeback many years later. He would not make the same mistakes again. Today's Li Yangzi is his own inner demon when he was a boy. Then the former Li family was his inner demon. When he was a boy, he didn't actually understand the grudges between adults. He had nothing to do with the destruction of the Qin family. But if Li Qingxin, Song Yan, and their children wanted him to die, then he would let these people die first. After the accident, the moment he recovered, he was thinking that he did not want to avenge the Qin family, but he had to avenge the destruction of his body. But who knew that things were unpredictable? He thought that was his nature. I never thought that I would fall in love with a woman. Li Yangzi asked the question himself. I couldn't help but laugh again. Regardless of whether she was afraid or not, there was actually no way he could let her leave his side. Lily watched him smile, and that smile made her whole body shiver. She remembered what Li Yangzi said when she was a teenager about what he was most afraid of. Thinking about it, he probably spent countless days like this in his long life. She grabbed Li Yangzi with her backhand. Although she said nothing, the look on her face made Li Yangzi laugh again. Why are you laughing? Lily was a little confused, and he came over with a smile and stole a kiss from the corner of her mouth. Although she didn't speak, she could tell from her expression just now. This girl probably thought that he said this. When he was a boy, he was hesitant to talk about this matter and had mentioned it to her in the beginning. She was afraid that she thought it was because of I was heartbroken by what happened to my mother. But in fact, the reason why he didn't want to mention it was not because he was sad, but simply because whenever he thought about it, his desire to kill Li Qingxin and others became deeper. He didn't feel good about the Li family when he was a child. The children of Li Qingxin and Song Yan treated him worse than an inferior servant and beat him. It wasn't until he awakened the power of the great demon and started practicing that those fatal pranks could not be solved. There is none left. And the reason why he didn't mention the Qin family was not because of the deep love between mother and son. Although Ms. Qin did give birth to herself, having herself was not the result she wanted. And after giving birth to Ms. Qin, she regarded Li Yangzi more as a tool for her revenge, a person she had never spent a day with. A woman who has no feelings, and he has no interest in revenge for the Qin family. The person in charge of the Li family now is Li Qingxin's father. Li Qingxin has been working hard all his life to become the head of the Li family. It is too cheap to simply kill him. The more he cares about something, the more Li Yangzi wants to take it away from him. In his own life, it was precisely because Li Qingxin noticed his son's murderous intention against him that he sent him to Shuiyu Lake. However, he did not meet Lily at that time and cleaned up what Li Qianchong left behind in Shuiyu Lake. After the mess, he was targeted by Li Qingxin. At that time, Li Qingxin had reached the late stage of nascent soul. He knew that his son had disliked him since he was a child, and he had similar feelings for Li Yangzi. The existence of this son was like a reminder of Li Qingxin's unhappy past and the pranks he played on his children. Turning a blind eye, if it were not for the rules of the Li family, he would have actually abolished Li Yangzi when he was born. He was blind to his son, so after knowing that Li Qianchong, his unsatisfactory cousin, had caused a big mess and angered a junior member of the Wang family who was in the nascent soul stage, he sent Li Yangzi to Shuiyu Lake. In fact, the person who beat him at that time wanted to kill his son at the hands of the Wang family. Unexpectedly, Li Yangzi not only survived in the end, but actually killed the Yuanying monks of the Wang family. While the Li family was in trouble, Li Qingxin was even more furious. He never expected that the son he had never seen in his eyes would reach the nascent soul stage and awaken at the age of less than 1,000 years old. The power of the great demon. If he had known earlier, he would have acted more secretly at the beginning, but now it was too late to regret having offended such an enemy. Li Qingxin was extremely angry. Both father and son wanted to kill each other and would not stop fighting. It's just that in the end Li Yangzi failed. The moment the Supreme Elder finally appeared, I gave up my physical body. Instead, I poured all my spiritual power into my soul. At that time, his cultivation had reached the Mahayana stage, but the Supreme Elders he faced were all the same. For someone with the same level of cultivation, he spent tens of thousands of years failing to reach the stage of transcending tribulation, and in the end it was because of the abandonment of his physical body. And pouring spiritual power into his soul made his soul's strength reach a stage of false tribulation. It's a pity that after losing his body, he only has his soul left. Even if the tyranny of his soul allows him to seize someone's body, he will definitely be killed as soon as he succeeds in seizing someone's body. But precisely because of the tyranny of his soul, the Li family could not kill him and instead sealed his soul. As for what happens next, you should know everything. He was used to getting whatever he wanted. He was unscrupulous, so when he wanted her, he did it without hesitation. At this time, after Li Yangzi finished speaking, he glanced at Lily. "Are you afraid?" Lily thought he was asking whether she was afraid of such a situation. So he shook his head. She has a calm personality, now that she knows this. She soon discovered that the two of them had no chance of winning. In the past, Li Yangzi faced the Li family alone. He would lose if he fought alone, but now they are facing each other together. Although the Li family is a giant, Li Yangzi has strong mental power, and he knows everything that happens in the future. The so-called knowing is known. Hey, the two of them may not die completely. She was still analyzing it seriously, but Li Yangzi hugged her into his arms. "Don't worry about this anymore, I'm not going to fight with the Li family anymore." Although a group of elders of the Li family sealed him. But in fact, Li Yangzi's rebellion brought great harm to the Li family. Many young members of the Li family, including Li Qingxin and others, died in his hands. In fact, after so many years in the starry sky, he was very tired of what he had done. In addition, now that there is Lily by his side, he would rather spend his time with Lily. He didn't plan to spend a long time on the Li family anymore, so he might as well do something that he was more interested in. Lily heard what he said. She was a little surprised, but seeing that Li Yangzi's expression was not forced, but extremely indifferent, she nodded. Now that the seal in Lily's body has been lifted, there is no problem in cultivation. The spiritual energy here is poor and it is not a good place for cultivation. Li Yangzi decided to return to Shuiyu Lake, which is full of spiritual energy and far away from the center of power of the Li family. As a boy, he once lived in Shuiyu Lake. Having stayed there for 2,000 to 3,000 years, it was very suitable for the two of them to practice. The two came out of the temporarily opened cave, and Lily took a look. This place was not the place where the two entered the Demon Ceiling Valley. She didn't know if it was because Xiaoya opened the gate of the Demon Ceiling Valley in advance, as Li Yangzi had said before, causing the location of the Demon Ceiling Valley to change, or the changes caused by Li Yangzi's attack on the Transformation God. The two of them didn't know what direction they were in at this time. Li Yangzi's hand shook, and he released the small boat that had taken Lily to Yunlu. The two jumped in, and the small boat quickly disappeared into the air. Li Yangzi didn't know where this place was for a moment. Fortunately, the boat flew not far away and happened to run into several low-level monks. Li Yangzi stopped them. These people were only in the foundation building stage. Even Lily couldn't compare. She was trembling with fear when she was stopped by two great monks. "Where is this place?" Hearing that Li Yangzi was just asking for directions, several people breathed a sigh of relief. One of the leading young men took a step forward, cupped his hands and said, "Senior, this is the territory under the Suanlugo Island. The juniors are here." He is a disciple of Xiansun. When Li Yangzi heard this, he frowned and threw out a few pieces of middle-grade spiritual stones. The few people who were stopped happily took the things and left. Fortunately, Jiluo Island is not far from the original Yunlu Island, and it also belongs to Tianyang continent. Although the journey to Shuiyu Lake from here is much further than Yunlu Island, the two of them are not in a hurry, so it is not a problem. Never mind. When they returned to Shuiyu Lake, it was already more than a month later. As soon as the boat Li Yangzi and Lily were riding entered the territory of Shuiyu Lake, they did not hide their figures and were quickly surrounded by people in Shuiyu Lake. The monk found out. This is the Li family's territory, who is trespassing. Li Yangzi snorted, and the huge coercion frightened several monks who came to stop them from sweating profusely, and they quickly fell to the ground. I have only been away for more than 100 years, and when I come back here, I am called a trespasser. When the monks heard this and looked at Li Yangzi's face, their expressions suddenly changed. Shuiyu Lake already had a new owner. When it was discovered that a powerful monk was coming, the owner of Shuiyu Lake had already been kicked out. It was Li Qianru who Li Qianwu had said would take over Li Yangzi's position. When she heard the servant's report, she still couldn't believe it. It wasn't until she actually saw Li Yangzi appearing in front of her that Li Qianru was startled. Why are you still alive? That day, Li Yangzi forced Li Qianwu away, only allowing his nascent soul to escape back to the Li family. After reporting his experience to the family, the Li family began to prepare to bring Li Yangzi back to Kanglin's family for trial. However, when the two nascent souls were later when the elder arrived at Shuiyu Lake, Li Yangzi's whereabouts had long been unknown. He left Shuiyu Lake with the ordinary mortal girl who had been imprinted by him. He had been away for more than 150 years. At first, the two elders were on guard against his return, but after more than 10 years, he never came back. People from the Li family once inquired that he, Xiao Aoho, Amologui and others had met on Yunlu Island. And since then, even the girl he took away has disappeared. Everyone in the Li family speculated that he went to some secret realm with Xiao Aoho and fell into the secret realm. It was not until more than 130 years ago that the Li family sent Li Qianru to guard this place. Unexpectedly, many years later, Li Yangzi not only came back, but also brought back a young girl with him. Li Qianru has reached the early stage of nascent soul, so he can naturally see that Lily has reached the golden elixir stage, and she should not be the mortal girl she was before. After all, if the maid really started practicing, she would not be able to break through the golden elixir easily even if it took more than 100 years to build the foundation. Because you haven't been here for many years, I have taken over it for the time being. I remembered that when Li Qianwu's soul escaped back, he mentioned it. Li Yangzi said it himself, if the Li family dared to send people to Shuiyu Lake again, he wanted to kill Li Qianru's body, leaving only her nascent soul to escape. At that time, Li Qianwu had reached the great perfection of the middle stage of Yuanying, but in the hands of this junior, only his Yuan Shen escaped, and his cultivation was completely ruined. It was not until more than 70 years ago that the Li family found another person for him. It's up to him to get a suitable body, and now that he's practicing again, he can only reach the level of cultivation in the late stage of Jindan. I'm sorry everyone, I'm so stuck on words. I may have deleted 20,000 words in the past 2 days. I will update 4,000 words first, and I will make up for the 10,000 words I owe one by one. This story is out of date. If time permits, I will finish it in advance and write an extra to compensate everyone. To be continued.